Hey there, baseball fans. Nathan Rohde and Shooter Hunt here for another edition of Coffee and Curveballs. We're talking about the Big 12 and the recruiting classes today. We've run through the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 10. Shift to the Big 12 now. Shooter, tell us, just kind of your first impressions of the conference and the recruiting classes.
For sure. Rich history with teams like Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. You're talking TCU's been to 4 straight College World Series. They're a mainstay there. It's the Omaha Frogs. I think that's what they say. But you're talking about Texas Tech, who's always on the verge, who very well could win a national championship in the next few years. And then Kansas and Kansas State. Baylor, who brought in Coach Rodriguez, who's already getting out on the recruiting trail and bringing big arms to the school. So there's just a lot to like about the Big 12 and this 2018 recruiting class. Oh, let me throw in West Virginia. How can I forget? Because Coach Mazey, I was with them this summer. They're bringing in guys, and we'll talk about some of their arms later on that I think have a chance to be special.
Mm-hmm. Well, starting us off, you mentioned Coach Steve Rodriguez at Baylor. Baylor's our first program to talk about. Right at the top, they've got one of the top arms in the country coming in with this next recruiting class, and that's Braxton Ashcraft, right-hander out of Texas. He's athletic on the mound. He's got a lively fastball, runs it into the low 90s, shows feel for a changeup. Coach Rodriguez is going to be sweating this one out a little bit. It's a Texas arm. Those guys get a lot of attention. Ashcraft is definitely on the radar of scouts for the draft.
Sure.
We've said it several times. We might start sounding like a broken record, but it is a deep draft class with high school, so some of these guys are going to get pushed down and probably end up on campus. Ashcraft, I'm on the fence right now as to where he's going to end up. If he throws strikes and shows a jump in the spring, then I can see him going off the board pretty good. But if he doesn't, I definitely see a chance for Baylor, getting him on the campus. One other guy that I want to mention, and kick it to you, Shooter, it's TJ Rumfield, first baseman. He's a switch hitter, big, strong kid, and he's got a short power swing at the plate. And he showed that off at the area code games over the summer. He just made loud contact the whole week. What isn't, one of those big names, not a top 100 guy in high school right now, but given his bat, certainly could be an impact guy for the Bears.
For sure. Ryan Segner's a right-handed arm, 6'2", about 195. I think even more is going to come from him in the future. It's a high three-quarter slot. Fastball comes out long, or the arm's somewhat long, but it's whippy. So I think there's even more in there. Good curveball in the mid-70s. Three-pitch guy who I think will have a chance to pitch on the weekends in the future for the Bears.
Mm-hmm. Certainly an interesting class, for Coach Rodriguez and Baylor coming in there. Moving on to Kansas, smaller class for Kansas, which could prove to be, tough. They're probably going to have to lean on that junior college recruiting a little bit more. So with just 5 high schoolers coming in, one of which is unlikely to make it to campus, and that's Jordan Groshans. He's a shortstop. For me, I don't know that he stays there. Probably moves off to third base, but that's not really his calling card. He'll be a fine defender there. He moves well. So it's not like he's a clogger or a slouch over there, but really it's about the bat for him. He's got easy right-handed power, super balanced at the plate. He was one of my favorite guys to watch hit over the summer just because of that ability with the bat. Big recruit, obviously, for the Jayhawks. His brother Jackson, older brother, is there already. So to get him on campus would be huge. I just don't see it for Kansas.
It sounds like he may be making his way into professional baseball right in June. But a kid that I think could surprise them on campus there in Lawrence would be a kid named Jackson Cobb from Kansas, catcher, was in a car accident, so he's just kind of coming back and, getting his feet under him, but really good behind the plate. And it's a physical 6'3" frame, so they can expect him to blossom when he gets to campus.
Mm-hmm. Just down the road in Manhattan, the little Big Apple, I think they call it, or the Little Apple, something like that. Rivals of Kansas, we got Kansas State, head coach Brad Hill there. 9 high school guys coming in, for this recruiting class. For me, Cole Stillwell kind of stands out as one of the top guys in this class. He's a catcher out of Texas. I think he's a pretty good chance of him ending up on campus. The bat is ahead of the defense right now. He's really balanced at the plate. He's got average power, some lift in his swing. So he's got a chance to really hit, especially at the college level. And then Jordan Wicks is a left-hander. He's got advanced pitchability up to 86, some late sink to the fastball. Also swings it a little bit and just tends to find the barrel. So who knows? Maybe he'll have an opportunity to play both ways for Kansas State.
For sure. And a guy that I like, or I think could become something in the future, is a kid named Eric Torres. He's out of Wisconsin, so not as many eyes have seen him. Ours have, and we have, because he was at the Future Games in 2016. And it's a whippy arm, 6 foot, about 168 pounds, going to add to that frame. But the ball comes out well, and I think he gets to campus, and he's a kid that could make a jump after 3 or 4 years at school.
Mm-hmm. Next up, you mentioned in our intro some historic programs, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State. We're on Oklahoma right now. Skip Johnson moving into that head coach role for the Sooners. Got an interesting class here. Some interesting guys. I don't know that there's really anybody that they're going to be sweating too much when it comes to the draft. For me, I've seen William Dennis, a skinny left-hander out of Kansas. Comes out of a high slot and he hides the ball well. So it's 86, 89, touches 90, but because of that high slot and him hiding the ball well, it really kind of gets on hitters. So he's a guy that could make a jump, for the Sooners, getting on campus. But Shooter, I know you've got some guys coming in for Oklahoma that are ones to watch.
For sure, Skip Johnson, this young new staff has come in, and really their 2019 class is what a lot of people are talking about in our world right now because it's so highly regarded. But they're laying down the foundation, what will help them win even more in the future. A kid named Ben Abram from Ontario. Big 6'7" right-hander, 87 to 89 right now, but the frame. He's just a monster. And, getting to campus and working with the staff, he's got a chance to, make those jumps and maybe find some more velocity. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some Oklahoma kids that they kept in state who are going to be really good. And Wyatt Olds is a right-handed arm who came onto the scene at a PBR event, actually, with our Oklahoma director, Andy Urban. Wyatt Olds, son of a coach, throwing from a true three-quarter slot, 87 to 89, really able to sink it. I think he may have been breaking metal bats at that event. But he's a guy who – son of a coach, again, is something that you love to have because they're going to be heady. They're going to understand the game more. But he's another arm for them that could take off. And then Caden Aldridge, you talked about maybe they don't hit the draft. Caden Aldridge, catcher from Oklahoma, is one where they could lose one to the draft. I think even last year he was thinking about reclassifying possibly and getting to campus early. That didn't end up happening. But he's 6'3", 205, super physical, fills out a uniform. Good behind the plate. We're talking sub 2.0 pop times. Can receive pretty well, but the power's there. Both gaps really drives the ball. And then once, I don't want to call it a sleeper because I think it's even more than that. Kid from Minnesota named David Roderick. He was at our fall championships. 6'4". He's still super lean and wiry. So I think he's going to add a lot more weight. But he's touched 90, maybe 91. But it's one of those where they kind of picked him up late, and I think there's a lot more to come from him where his best years are in the future on campus.
Then moving to the other side of the Red River rivalry, Oklahoma State, Josh Holliday obviously making a name for himself as a head coach there. Has a past of being, a big-time recruiter, at some big programs and, known across the country, not just regionally. But obviously the Cowboys, have some strong guys coming in.
For sure they do. And one that I caught towards the end of the summer was a kid named Houston Morrow out of Florida. Now, it's a two-way type talent where he can play the infield, but on the mound, it projects more as a bullpen arm for me because there's some effort in there. But fastball slider, he's able to spin it, so he can do a couple things for Coach Holliday there. Another kid that I like is John Kelly, a New Jersey product. Was up to 93 early in the summer when I saw him, but real tough kid, just a winner. Hasn't been pitching for too long because he also played shortstop for a while. So it's going to be a fresh arm. So getting on campus for him, it's going to be one of those where he can keep climbing. And then a couple guys that I like to to bloom on campus are Nathaniel Peterson from Minnesota, who I saw last winter. As a bullpen arm, for me, it could be something that for 3-4 years, Coach Holliday knows he can go to him because he can spin that breaking ball. It's into the upper 80s with some arm side run to it. But he's a guy that can really give them some depth in the bullpen. And then Ryan Gendron is just an athlete to watch out for. He's from Oklahoma, shortstop pitcher, so the athleticism is something that they're going to really take advantage of there at Stillwater.
And then before we move on, I want to mention Tyler Polk. He's a right-hander out of Oklahoma. A little bit of an undersized guy, but pitches in high 80s, can run it into low 90s. Is up to 93 for me at the area code games. Flashes a sharp slider. So kind of an interesting arm that, is likely to end up on campus because of the size, as a right-hander working against him. But obviously has some arm strength and arm speed in there in that he runs his fastball into the low 90s. So, could, turn into something there for Coach Holliday and company.
For sure.
But down in Texas, the Longhorns have a historic program, hit a lull for a number of years. Seems like they're really kind of coming back into it. Got a big recruiting class coming in. Almost a dozen and a half recruits, I think, coming out of high school. And they're going to need it because some of these guys aren't going to get to campus. Starting with Simeon Woods Richardson. Again, nothing's a guarantee, but he's, right now for me, the highest ranked guy in the Texas recruiting class. Really lean, athletic. It's just really easy coming out. Up to the mid-90s. He had an immaculate inning at the area code games. He struck out 3 hitters on 9 pitches, and then the leadoff hitter of the next inning came out, struck him out on 3 pitches. So he had 4 strikeouts on 12 pitches.
Oh, wow.
Breaking ball in the first outing was just so-so. Came back for another outing later in the event and flashed an absolute hammer. So he's a guy that's on my list. Going to go see him in the spring. No two ways about it. So it's going to be tough for Texas to get him on campus. Ty Madden, another right-hander out of Texas, an arm to keep an eye on with the draft. Colby Kubicek is a guy I've seen, right-hander. Athletic frame. It's a really simple, compact windup. Not a lot of attention on the draft side just because he's not kind of one of those big physical guys. He's not undersized, but he's also not big and projectable. But he's 88-91, touches 92, advanced feel for the changeup. I really like this guy as one of those good college arms to show up on campus.
For sure. And one that I like is a kid out of New England. He's now at IMG down in Florida, but Bryce Reagan is a true shortstop. I saw him make some spectacular plays down in Jupiter. The athleticism is just through the roof for him. And he can really swing it, solid runner. One that I think they may have to worry about a little bit come draft time, but if he gets to campus, he's a guy who can really stick up the middle for them. And I just got to say, a couple down years for Texas, like you were saying earlier, the low, that's like 2 or 3 years. Take it in a second. It's 2 or 3 years, but Coach Pierce has got them going in the right direction right now.
Certainly. And, as you can tell from the guys that we just talked about, a lot of arms in this class. Woods Richardson and Madden we talked about, Kubicek. Mason Bryant is another big kind of Texas arm. And then Owen Meany, who stood out this fall, is a guy certainly to keep an eye on. So definitely kind of an arms race down in Texas, which is nothing new. We're always talking about pitchers coming out of the Lone Star State. So it'll be interesting to see how many actually end up on campus in Austin.
For sure. And TCU, I know we're moving on, but they've become kind of the staple in the college world. They're at the College World Series every year. They've had some great battles in state with some super regional games and series. But Coach Schlossnagle has done a great job there, and he's really elevated that program in Fort Worth to, they are a top 5 program every year. So who do you like? Because they're going to have some trouble with the draft too this year.
They are. It's going to be tough, and obviously speaks to Coach Schlossnagle, Coach Sarlos, the work that they've done. Right at the top, we've got Alec Thomas, who is actually committed to TCU to play football as well. So that'll probably, to me, that's kind of a bargaining chip for him. He certainly can play football at TCU. He's a heck of an athlete. But for me, he's a first rounder. Like, this guy's going, potentially top half of the first round. I liken him to Kenny Lofton. He's got that speed defense profile. And then the feel for hit for me is some of the best in the country. He doesn't back down to velocity. I saw him this summer, 95 on the outer black, and boom, he goes the other way down the line. And then someone tries to bust him in with a 90-plus fastball. He turns on it and pulls it to right field. He's a plus runner. Gets incredible reads on defense. I know when we did ACC, we were talking about Mike Ciani and the defense that he brings to center field. If there's anybody in the country that's a better defender than Mike Ciani in center field, it's Alec Thomas.
Wow.
Guy's tremendous out there. He can really run it down. I'm sorry, Horned Frogs, you guys aren't getting him. This guy's going to go play pro ball. His dad is the strength coach for the Chicago White Sox, so he's kind of got that pro background, that pro upbringing. So he's a guy that, unfortunately, we're not going to see him in college, but just a tremendous athlete and a guy to just continue watching it. Even if he does make it to college, he's going to be a dynamic player no matter where he goes. Adam Kloffenstein, big, strong, right-handed pitcher. If that sounds familiar, he's from Texas. Runs it into the low 90s, might touch a little bit higher. He's definitely a guy that, Coach Sarlos, is going to be sweating whether he's going to be on the staff or not as a freshman. He's got some big attention from the draft, from scouts. So he'll be a guy to watch. Another one of those guys that I'm kind of on the fence about. Certainly could step into that being an elite arm coming out of the draft. But if he does end up at school, again, because of the depth of this class, it wouldn't shock me. But I don't know that I would put money on it either. Same goes for Matt Rudis, projectable right-handed arm from Texas. So, a guy that could really help TCU. They've done a good job of developing players, but he may not end up there.
And one of the guys that I really like who also may not end up there is Mateo Gil. Two-way guy, can hop on the mound, run it up there in the low 90s with that quick, whippy arm action. Mm-hmm. But I think he sticks in the infield. It's a shortstop who, if he gets to campus, is able to do, hit at the top of the order. He's got that plus speed to work with. And if the name sounds familiar, his dad is also a big leaguer. So he's got those bloodlines to help him out. But Coach Slosh has got a lot of good talent coming to Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm. And then Marcelo Perez is one guy I'm going to throw in there real quick because I know our Texas scouting director, Toby Bicknell, is a huge fan of him. He's an undersized guy, but it's a really quick arm, low 90s fastball. So he's a guy that, probably does end up on campus, but is one to watch that could develop into something.
Coach Starlos likes those guys.
And he does.
Elevated.
He really does. But, Shooter, moving on to Texas Tech, for me, the guy to watch is Max Marischak. He's a wiry framed outfielder, top of the scale speed. I mean, this guy absolutely flies. It's like he doesn't even touch the ground when he's going down the line. The question will be whether he can put the ball in play enough to really use that speed. He showed some swing and miss tendencies at the area code games, but nonetheless, a pretty good athlete. A guy that I do think ends up on campus and could be a really dynamic player, for the Raiders.
It shouldn't be a surprise how successful they've been, especially lately. Coach Tadlock, and you're talking Coach J. Bob Thomas, good coaches with good players usually do great things. And that's what they've done. I really like this class that they're bringing in and the ones behind them. But a kid out of Colorado named Tanner Otremba is a kid that Texas Tech fans are going to love.
Mm-hmm.
Because he goes full speed at all times. He's a shorter, probably about 5'10", but it's stocky and strong.
Mm-hmm.
Could run a little bit, but he doesn't get cheated at the plate, and it's that uphill path, angle the shoulders, and he's driving it gap to gap with some home run power.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one, similarly with that power, is a kid named Jose Gonzalez out of Texas. You talked about Toby Bicknell, our Texas scouting director. Coach Bix loves him some Jose Gonzalez. And he doesn't get cheated either. And Texas Tech they've really built that reputation that they can hit. And these guys get after pitchers and don't make it easy on them. And these guys are going to be in the same mold.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, to wrap up the Big 12 for us, we got West Virginia. Shooter, you mentioned them in the opening, joining the Big 12 a few years ago. And they've really made some noise on the recruiting ground. picking up some big recruits, starting with Brock Halverson, right-hander out of Pennsylvania.
For sure. And Coach Mazey brought in Coach Dave Serrano, who was formerly at Tennessee and legendary coach in Southern California, to work with those pitchers. And two arms that he's bringing in that I think Coach Serrano is going to have a lot of fun with, taking them to another level, is Brock Halverson. Kid out of Pennsylvania, right-hander. It's a super whippy arm. Was in the low 90s in the fall after having a little bit of tendonitis maybe earlier in the summer towards the end of the spring. But he's coming back, and the frame is incredibly projectable. It's still thin, wiry. It's athletic, but I wouldn't be surprised if he puts on 30-plus pounds his time at West Virginia. And then Theo McDowell, a kid out of Vermont actually, was a hockey player. Then he was an infielder at the Future Games in 2016, but now is a pitcher, right-hand arm, and it's coming from a vicious three-quarter slot, getting that sink, and another one that Coach Serrano is going to really enjoy working with because there's a lot of talent in there, and he's going to be able to bring it out. And then Coach Sabins, I can't say enough about him on the recruiting trail. Everywhere I'm at, I feel like he's next to me watching somebody. So a kid from Virginia, Tevin Tucker, shortstop, super athletic, just has feel for the game where he makes the big play in a big situation, lays out, and has the chance to stick at shortstop and hit the top of the lineup because he's a quick kid, will steal a bag for you. But West Virginia's got some good ones coming in.
They certainly do. And I know one person that'll be really happy about that is our own Mark Dvorznak, does business development for us, putting together a lot of tournaments. He played at WVU, is a big Mountaineer fan, so we know we'll give him a shout-out, and we know he's going to be happy with what the baseball program is doing there. But that's a look at the Big 12. So we're almost through all the Power 5. We've done the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, now the Big 12. Next up will be the Pac-12, and then after that we'll look at some non-Power 5 conferences, some mid-major types, some recruiting classes that really kind of stand out to us. So this is Coffee and Curveballs. I'm Nathan Rohde. He's Shooter Hunt. Make sure to jump on PrepBaseballReport.com. Plenty of content to get you through the winter until spring when baseball fires up again. Until next time, we'll see you at the ballpark.